I didn't always see the world this way. Once I believed in loyalty. I believed that the people around me, especially those I paid well, treated fairly, and allowed into my home, were grateful and trustworthy. But wealth changes everything. Not just people around you, but you. It eats at you slowly, like water dripping on stone, wearing down your ability to trust. When you have everything, you start to believe that everyone wants to take it from you. That's where I was when all of this began. Trapped in my own mansion, surrounded by marble floors, priceless paintings, and silence. Too much silence. My wife had passed away 3 years earlier, and though I'd grown used to the quiet, I hadn't grown immune to the paranoia that came with it. Every creak of the wooden stairs, every drawer slightly ajar, every misplaced object felt like a whisper from the shadows. Her name was Elena. She had been my maid for nearly 7 years. Never late, never rude, never intrusive. She was the kind of woman who cleaned with reverence, as if dusting sacred spaces, and who moved through the house like a shadow, always present, yet invisible. I rarely spoke to her beyond polite greetings, but I saw her. I saw her hands, worn, calloused, old before their time. I saw the quiet in her eyes, the kind that held back entire lifetimes. At first, the suspicion crept in like a chill draft through a crack in the window. I couldn't explain it, just a feeling. I noticed things, small things, trivial even, a silver pen from my study gone, a watch I hadn't worn in months missing from its drawer, jewelry my late wife had once cherished, not exactly where I remembered placing it. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself grief warps memory, but the whisper wouldn't stop. Friends, if you can call them that, began to plant darker seeds. One evening, over an expensive dinner at my club, a colleague laughed while swirling his brandy and said, "You still keep help around the house? Man, with all that money lying around, that's brave, brave." The word clung to me like smoke. That night, I sat in my office long after the lights were out, staring at the old safe behind my bookshelf. It wasn't that I thought Elena needed the money. I paid her more than fair wages, even gave her bonuses during the holidays. But I realized I didn't know her. Not really. And if I didn't know her, how could I trust her? Still, something in me hesitated. I had fired men with the stroke of a pen. I had ended careers in boardrooms with a single glance. But here I was, doubting a woman who had folded my shirts with care and dusted my wife's photo every morning without fail. Why couldn't I just ask? Why did the idea of confronting her feel so beneath me? Because I didn't want truth. I wanted certainty. And that's when the idea struck me. I'd test her, not directly. No confrontation, no accusations, just an open safe, a small stack of untraceable bills, and a hidden camera tucked inside a book on the shelf, a setup so subtle she wouldn't even know she was being watched. If she touched nothing, then I'd put the suspicions to rest. But if she did, well, then I'd have my answer, and I'd be justified. The next morning I walked into my study and spun the dial of the safe. It clicked open with a soft groan. I pulled out the bundles of cash, enough to tempt anyone, even a saint, and arranged them like bait. I left the safe ajar, the door tilted just enough. I adjusted the camera's angle, tested the feed on my phone, and left the room, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. Hours passed. Elena arrived as she always did, right on time. I heard the gentle rustle of her footsteps across the hall, the soft hum she often sang under her breath. I watched the feed from my office upstairs, barely breathing. Part of me wanted her to fail, and that realization was like a knife in my chest. What kind of man had I become? When she entered the study, I leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. She paused at the doorway, glanced around, and then stepped inside. She approached the safe slowly. My throat went dry, my palms were sweating, and then she knelt. She didn't take anything. She didn't touch the money. She closed the safe. And then something happened I didn't expect. She placed her hand gently on the steel door and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then she cried, only for a moment, only in silence, but it was unmistakable. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she wiped it quickly before returning to her chores as if nothing had happened. I turned off the feed, and I couldn't breathe. The morning after I saw Elena cry in front of my safe, I told myself it meant nothing. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe she missed someone. Maybe she had no idea the safe was even open. But the human mind is a strange and restless thing, especially when it's poisoned by doubt. You see something that doesn't quite fit, and instead of putting it to rest, your mind stretches it, reshapes it, twists it into something darker. I wanted to believe her reaction meant she was innocent, but a part of me still clung to the thought, what if it was guilt? That part of me, the cold, analytical man who had made his fortune by never taking chances, was louder than the rest. So I set the trap again. Only this time, I did it with intention, methodically, like a man planning a hostile takeover. No emotion, just logic. I reopened the safe, removed the jewelry, replaced it with an even more tempting sight, several neat stacks of crisp $100 bills, $50,000 in total, enough to buy a used car, pay for a semester of college, or settle a lifetime of quiet debt. This wasn't just a test anymore. It was an invitation. I made sure the bills were just messy enough to appear untouched. I left the door slightly more open than before, and this time, I didn't just position the hidden camera, I added a second one behind the lamp on my desk and another in the vent near the ceiling. 2 angles, no blind spots. I told myself it wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. And yet, the moment the cameras began recording, I felt something deep in my chest. Not guilt, exactly, more like shame dressed in expensive logic. I sat back in my leather chair, staring at the live feed on my phone. The study looked exactly as it always did, elegant, cold, untouched by emotion. That room had once been my wife's favorite. She'd read poetry there, painted in silence by the window. It used to be warm. Now it was a trap. I wondered what she would think of me now. Elena arrived shortly after noon. I heard the soft click of the front door open and close, her familiar, "Good afternoon, Mr. Carlyle," echoing faintly through the house. I didn't answer. I watched. She moved through the house with her usual grace, cleaning as she always did, quietly, efficiently, never in a rush. Every movement of hers was like a ritual. She dusted the grandfather clock in the hallway. She wiped the kitchen counters with careful, circular strokes. When she finally entered the study, I felt my heart rate rise like I was standing in court, waiting for a verdict. She stepped inside. She didn't go straight to the safe. She walked past it. I leaned in. My phone trembled slightly in my hands. She wiped the window, dusted the edge of the bookcase, rearranged a few volumes, and then, slowly, her gaze landed on the safe. She froze. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. She walked over, my breath caught, and then she did something I didn't expect. She took out a small white cloth from her apron pocket, bent over, and gently, almost lovingly, polished the edge of the safe door. Not the money, not the lock, just the steel. Her reflection shimmered in its surface, her face calm. She stood up straight, eyes drifting to the cash. For a brief second, I thought she might reach out. She didn't. Instead, she closed the door, fully, softly, as if it were her job to protect what wasn't hers. Then she turned around and walked away. I rewound the footage again and again, looking for something, anything, a twitch in her hand, a flicker of greed, a hidden pocket. But there was nothing, only her eyes, and that strange moment before she left the study, where she looked around the room like she was saying goodbye to someone who wasn't there. I turned off the phone and sat in the dark. I had caught no thief, no liar, no criminal. Only a woman who treated my possessions better than I had, who mourned in silence when I turned her life into a test. And suddenly, I didn't feel like the man with the power anymore. I felt like a child who had looked under the bed hoping to find a monster, but instead found a mirror. Still, I couldn't bring myself to speak to her yet, because now the question was no longer what would she do. The question was, what would I do? The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. I don't know why. Maybe it was restlessness. Maybe it was the guilt clawing at the edges of my sleep. Or maybe, on some deeper level, I knew I owed her something. If not an apology, then at least the dignity of understanding who she really was. So I did what any man with more money than patience would do. I started digging. I had never bothered to learn much about Elena. I knew her name, of course. I had a file from the agency I'd hired her through 7 years ago. Clean background, strong references, a work ethic described by every former employer as exceptional. She never called in sick, never asked for advances. She never even accepted the holiday bonus unless I insisted. But who was she outside these walls? The first call I made was to the agency, pretending I needed to update her employment status. The woman on the line, young and indifferent, pulled up her records and read out details I already knew, but one note caught my attention. Former schoolteacher, São Paulo, Brazil, emigrated after husband's passing. I paused. A teacher? Why was a woman who once stood in front of classrooms scrubbing the edges of my fireplace? I hung up and sat there, staring at the sunlight bleeding through the curtains, painting the floor in broken gold. And that was when I remembered something strange. A moment months earlier, when I passed by the laundry room and heard her softly reciting multiplication tables in Portuguese. I had thought nothing of it then. Now it hit me like a whisper from a different lifetime. I decided to visit the neighborhood she lived in, a modest area on the edge of town, far from my gated reality. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't bring the car with tinted windows or the driver. I went alone. Her building was older but clean. Flowers bloomed defiantly in cracked planters. Children played with sticks instead of smartphones. There was a strange beauty in it, life distilled into its essentials. No marble, no gold, just presence. I asked the woman at the corner store if she knew Eleanor. She smiled immediately. "Oh, Miss Eleanor, Claro. Everyone knows her. She teaches the kids English after school. Free lessons." I blinked. Wait, she teaches them? For free? Sim. She used to be a professor, lost her husband, came here with nothing, still gives everything. I stood there feeling the words settle into me like stones in a still pond. "She brings food to Dona Marta too," the woman added casually. "The old lady on the 3rd floor who can't leave her apartment anymore. Elena cooks for her on weekends." I thanked her and left the store in silence, my hands cold despite the summer sun. How had I missed all of this? I had invited Elena into my home, but never once into my awareness. I saw her, but I had never looked. She had polished my silver, folded my linens, made my bed, but I had reduced her to background noise, a living utility, a ghost with keys. And yet, she had been carrying an entire world quietly on her back. A woman who lost everything, her career, her country, her partner, and still chose to give what little she had left to others. No complaint, no pity party, just quiet, unwavering dignity. That night I watched the footage again, not because I doubted her, but because I needed to see it with new eyes. I watched her wipe down my wife's picture frame. I watched her straighten the blanket on my chair. I watched her glance at the open safe and choose, without hesitation, to walk away. But this time, I wasn't watching to catch her. I was watching to understand her. I saw the tired way she moved after bending down, the way her shoulders curved from years of quiet labor. I saw the way she smiled, not for me, but to herself, when the sunlight hit the window just right. And I realized something that cut deeper than all my suspicions combined. I had been so afraid of being taken from that, I never once considered what she had already lost. This wasn't just about money. This was about something sacred, the act of seeing another person in their full humanity. I had failed her. I had failed myself. And yet, despite it all, she kept showing up every day, folding my shirts with care, dusting the corners of a house where she was invisible, whispering to my late wife's portrait like a prayer. The next day, I knew what I had to do, but I didn't know if I had the courage to face her. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. It wasn't insomnia, not the kind that's cured with pills or meditation. It was something heavier, Something that sat on my chest and refused to move, like the weight of everything I had never allowed myself to feel. I stayed in the study, surrounded by silence and shadows, with my phone in hand. The video file was right there. I had watched it before, yes, but only as a judge watches evidence. This time I opened it not to catch someone in the act, but to see what I had missed the first time. The truth behind the quiet. The footage began. Elena entered the study, as she always did. Methodical, calm. The first thing she did was adjust the curtain, barely a centimeter, so the sunlight wouldn't fade the books on the shelf. Then she bent down and retrieved a fallen paperclip I hadn't even noticed. She polished the handles of the desk drawers. Her every movement was careful, respectful, as if this place, my office, was a temple. Then came the moment. She turned toward the safe, paused, and slowly stepped forward. My breath caught, not out of fear this time, but something closer to reverence. She didn't open the safe. It was already open, exactly as I had left it, with its neatly stacked cash visible and tempting. She didn't flinch, didn't touch the money. Instead, she simply stood there, as if in the presence of something sacred. She reached out with her cloth and gently wiped the steel door, like a ritual, not a task. And then she did something that still haunts me. She closed the safe. But before she did, she placed her hand on the edge of the open door and whispered something. I turned up the volume, adjusted the feed. There was a soft hiss of background noise, but under it, barely audible, I heard it. God, forgive him, he doesn't see me. The words struck like thunder. I replayed them, again and again. He doesn't see me. My throat tightened, my eyes burned. It wasn't anger in her voice, it wasn't resentment. It was sorrow, pure, unfiltered. The kind that comes from being invisible for too long. She wasn't praying for herself, she was praying for me. She closed the safe and turned away. Her posture didn't stiffen, her expression didn't harden. She simply continued with her work, as if she hadn't just stood face to face with betrayal and met it with compassion. And that's when I saw it. Not in the cameras, not in the safe, but in myself. I had set a trap for a thief, only to realize I was the one who had stolen something far more precious. Her dignity, her trust, her unseen labor of love. I had built an empire where no one could get close enough to hurt me, and in doing so, I had become the thing I feared most. Cold, detached, blind to goodness when it stood right in front of me. The footage ended. I sat there, shoulders heavy, the quiet no longer comfortable but condemning. My wife's photo sat just behind me on the shelf. I turned to look at her. Her smile was still the same, warm, knowing, forgiving. She would have seen Elena, she would have thanked her. I lowered my head and whispered, "I'm sorry." But apologies in empty rooms feel like pebbles in oceans. They make ripples, but they don't move the tide. I knew what I had to do, and this time I wouldn't hide behind screens or silence. I would speak to Elena, not as a man guarding his wealth, but as a man humbled by his blindness. A man learning too late what it means to truly see. I stood at the top of the staircase that morning, longer than I care to admit. She was already here. I could hear the soft movements below, the faint hum of a tune she always sang under her breath, the clink of dishes being gently placed in the drying rack. She was doing what she always did, caring for a house that had never cared for her, but today would be different. I walked down slowly, my steps heavier than usual. Not because of age or stiffness, but because I knew that what I was about to do required more courage than any business deal I'd ever negotiated. Money had insulated me for years, but now I felt exposed. She was in the dining room, dusting the glass cabinet, her back to me. She didn't hear me at first, or maybe she did, and chose not to turn. When I finally spoke, my voice came out quieter than I expected. "Elena." She paused. Her shoulders stiffened for just a second, then relaxed. She turned slowly, her face calm, neither warm nor cold, just composed, like someone who had prepared herself for anything. I didn't know where to begin. I could have opened with an apology. I could have confessed everything, how I had tested her, doubted her, watched her. But somehow those words felt small in the face of her dignity. So I said the only honest thing I could. "I saw what you did with the safe." She looked at me, expression unreadable. "You didn't know I had cameras in there," I continued. "I set it up. I was trying to catch you." The silence that followed was unbearable. I thought maybe you were stealing from me. Things went missing. I felt paranoid. I let it grow into something ugly. I wanted proof, and I thought I'd get it. Still, she said nothing. "I saw you close the safe. I heard what you whispered." Her lips parted slightly then, just the smallest flicker of emotion breaking through. But she didn't speak. Not yet. I thought I was protecting myself. I was wrong, I admitted. "You've been more honest in this house than I've ever been with myself. I don't even know how to begin making that right." At last, she spoke. Her voice was steady, quiet, like someone used to speaking truths into rooms that rarely listened. "Mr. Carlyle, I knew about the cameras." I froze. She continued. "I saw the lens in the book spine 2 days ago, and the one in the vent. I used to teach physics back home. I know what surveillance looks like. I felt the ground shift beneath me, but I didn't say anything," she said, "because I wanted to see what you'd do. I wanted to know if you'd come to me, or hide behind your money like everyone else." Her gaze was direct. No venom, no tears, just truth. "You didn't hurt me with the camera, sir," she added. "You hurt me with your silence." Those words landed like a blow to the chest. I opened my mouth to respond, but she wasn't finished. "I've cleaned your wife's photo every morning for 7 years. I've mended your shirts. I've prayed in this house when I thought no one was listening. And still, I was just a suspicion in your eyes." Her voice cracked slightly on the last sentence, but she didn't cry. "I don't want your money, Mr. Carlyle. I never did. I wanted respect, and silence isn't respect. It's absence." I stepped forward, slowly. "You're right," I said. "Everything you've said. I've lived behind walls for so long I forgot what it means to be human with another human. You've shown me more decency than I deserved." And then I said the words I had never said to anyone who worked for me in my entire life. "Thank you for your grace, for your patience, for not being like me." Her eyes softened just a bit. She nodded once, then turned to leave the room. Before she disappeared into the hall, she paused and said something I will never forget. "Don't say thank you to feel better. Say it when you mean it, and if you really mean it, let it change something." And just like that, she was gone. I stood there, the morning sun pouring across the floor, realizing that for the first time in years, someone had told me the truth without fear, and that truth, her truth, had broken the last wall I had left. The house felt different after she left that morning. It wasn't the silence. I'd grown used to that. It was the weight of something missing, something I hadn't realized she'd filled. Elena hadn't just cleaned the rooms. She had filled the space with something intangible. Presence, rhythm, humanity. Now, without her, everything echoed. For the first time in years, I sat in the kitchen. Not the grand dining room or my office with the mahogany desk, just the small kitchen table where she used to leave folded napkins and wipe crumbs that weren't hers. I stared at the empty chair across from me, wondering how someone so quiet had made such noise in my life the moment she was gone. I thought about calling her. I even picked up the phone twice, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not when I had nothing but words to offer. She deserved more than that. She deserved action, so I went back to her neighborhood. This time, I didn't dress like the man with money. I didn't drive the sleek car. I went as a man trying to make amends. The corner store lady recognized me immediately. "You're Eleanor's boss," she said. Her tone was cautious, like she didn't quite know whether to frown or smile. "I was," I answered quietly. She gave me a long look, then nodded toward the back of the store. "She's not working today. She's at the school. Saturdays she tutors the kids." The school was a small building, no more than 4 classrooms. Paint peeled from the walls, and the playground was just a few rusted swings and worn-out tires. But inside, I saw something I hadn't expected. Elena, standing before a small group of children, was teaching them English. Her hands moved as she spoke, using objects in the room to explain meaning. A boy raised his hand and she beamed, nodded, and knelt beside him like his answer was the most important sound in the world. She hadn't noticed me yet, and I didn't interrupt. I sat on the bench outside, watching through the open window, listening to her voice carry through the air, soft, kind, filled with the kind of hope that can't be bought. When the class ended, I stood up and waited near the gate. She saw me, and her expression didn't change. No surprise, no smile, just calm. I stepped forward. "I'm not here to explain," I said, "or to fix what I can't. I'm here because I want to make something right." She crossed her arms. "You can't undo what was done." "I know," I said, "but maybe I can build something new." That afternoon, I handed her an envelope. Inside was a deed to a house. Small, but hers, fully paid, no strings. And next to it, papers registering the creation of a small foundation in her name, the Eleanor Fund. Its purpose? To provide resources for immigrant women with teaching backgrounds to find work and rebuild their lives. "I used to think power meant protection," I told her. "But now I think real power is knowing when to give it away." She opened the envelope slowly. Her hands trembled just slightly. Her eyes scanned the paper, then met mine. "Why?" she asked. And I answered honestly, "Because you gave more to me than anyone ever has. And you asked for nothing in return. You reminded me that kindness isn't weakness, that silence can carry strength, and that I've lived too long in a house built on pride." For the first time, her expression cracked. She looked down, blinked hard, and nodded. "Thank you," she said softly. "But say it," she added. "When you mean it, I mean it." A long silence followed, the kind that says more than words. She didn't hug me. She didn't cry. She didn't forgive me in a grand cinematic gesture. She simply placed the envelope in her bag, looked me in the eyes and said, "Then let's both start living differently." And she walked away, not out of anger, but with peace. That night, the house was still silent, but it no longer felt empty, because for the first time in my life, I had learned how to see, and once you truly see someone, you can't go back. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved us, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories that reveal the unseen. Leave a comment below. Tell us, have you ever misjudged someone and realized it too late? We'd love to hear your voice.